There are lots of stories in the news that are of great concern to me, and I'm sure they are to you as well. This PayPal story is definitely one that hits close to the heart. I use PayPal. I've used it for years, but the time has come, I think. Like I had to fire the big banks last year, I think it's maybe time to fire PayPal. In fact, they've lost $6 billion worth of worth in just the past 24 hours. And delete PayPal searches on Google are up 1,300%. That's quite a bit. Joining us right now from Liberty Sentinel is Alex Newman. Good morning to you, Alex.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, praise be to God. Thank you for your time today. Okay, let's start with your history with PayPal, Liberty Sentinel's history with PayPal. Can you give us some background?
Yeah, well, appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about this. About a year ago, I got a note from them by email saying that they were freezing my money, that they were not going to allow me to do business anymore with them, and that this was due to some sort of violation of their terms of use, their terms of service. And so I called them and said, hey, I need my money, and what violation or alleged violation took place here. And somebody in India, I assume, or Pakistan said, oh, yeah, we'll get back to you right away with a reason. Don't worry, and we'll let your money free as soon as we know that you don't owe us anything. Well, months and months went by, and I tried over and over and over again to get an explanation. Never got one. So the only thing I can figure, they actually canceled my account just a few days after I interviewed one of the senior people over at Rebel News, which is a major Canadian news outlet. They have, for perspective, they have, I think, 1.5 million subscribers in a country of, less than 40 million. So
wow.
Very significant news operation. They had been canceled by PayPal. I brought them on my program to talk about it, and then right after that is when I got banned myself. So I have to assume that was the cause.
So you don't actually know. It was never, ever clarified.
Nope. They refused to tell me. They did eventually, after a few months, release my money. But it was happening right in the midst of many other people getting their PayPal accounts canceled for speaking out against the totalitarianism, for expressing opinions that PayPal didn't agree with on homosexuality, on marriage, on gender. I'm sure you remember they had been trying to bully the state of North Carolina not long before that, because it was doing its best to protect young girls and women from men in the bathroom. So it's just very, very bizarre that this company, the board members of this company who have a fiduciary duty to shareholders, would think it's appropriate to burn down the company and discriminate against people based on their faith, based on their speech, when their job is actually to make money. So.
Yeah. A trend that seems to be increasing these days. So over the weekend, there was this story that came out that PayPal had changed its user agreement, which included some language about fining its users for misinformation. Can you give us the story there?
Yeah, it's really extraordinary. They actually slipped this into the terms of service very quietly, and somebody finally noticed it. But what they did was they said they were going to fine their users and their account holders $2,500 if they were found to have put out misinformation. And at this point, everybody knows that the misinformation police are basically the biggest purveyors of misinformation. They say it's misinformation to say that men can't get pregnant. They say it's misinformation, or they said for 2 years that it was misinformation to say the COVID injection didn't actually protect you from COVID. Now, of course, we know that's all true. They say it's misinformation to say that the gas we exhale is not causing dangerous toxic pollution that's going to destroy the climate. So basically anything that the establishment doesn't want said is considered misinformation. And so PayPal tried to slip this in there. The backlash, though, was so huge, so extraordinary, and so fast that they ended up backing down and kind of pretending like they didn't really mean to do it. But, considering PayPal's long track record of discriminating against Christians, of hating its own customers, they think we're really stupid to believe something like that.
You know what I find fascinating about this, because I looked up several different articles. Of course, Daily Wire was one of the ones that sort of led the way in breaking the news, of course. Everybody reported on it, but when the fact checkers chimed in, this is what I thought was hilarious. So PayPal basically came out and said, oh, we never intended for that to be a part of the language. I don't know how that happened. Silly us. And I'm just like, do they think we're that dumb that they'd sit around and have Like, who writes draft copies of user agreements and just says like fantasy draft copies of user agreements is like fantasy football kind of a thing. Like, this is the most absurd answer that we've, like, why can't they just admit, yes, we really want to do this and we'll just have to wait a couple more months before we get this done?
Yeah, it shows you the level of dishonesty that we're dealing with, too. You know, it's one thing to be a PR hack and try to figure out how best to cover for your company, but we need to consider honesty as well. You know, as Christians, we recognize that telling the truth is important, and PayPal should have owned this. But, you know, and it came right on the heels of another scandal. They actually banned the account of the Free Speech Union in the UK. Major organization, and when all the major newspapers and even members of parliament started speaking out and they started threatening regulation, PayPal again said, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. We didn't really mean to ban the free speech advocates. Sorry about that. We've reinstated their account. But this is, I guess, how their PR department works. They just run around lying after their bosses, their overlords step in it. So.
Mr. Newman, you know, one could say, well, you know, that's the kind of risk that you take when you go on to somebody else's platform. You know, you have to play by their rules. But, you know, considering how much power these corporations have over individuals, I mean, there's stories also, and this isn't related to PayPal specifically, but there's companies, organizations like, you know, that have gone to countries like Ireland and they litigate to make sure that certain things can't be said, and they change the political landscape of a country. Where do we draw the line here when these companies have so much power over what we can say?
Yeah, I think in the United States, the answer to that is very clear-cut. Every one of these companies has been working very closely with the government. This has come out in lawsuits. This has been known for years. This has been exposed in discovery processes and court cases for many years now. And it's actually accelerated. We now have Freedom of Information Act documents proving that the Biden administration has assigned people across multiple federal agencies to work with the big tech companies to silence voices that they don't like. And most recently, they were exposed silencing Alex Berenson. And as part of a lawsuit, they had to reinstate him. That, of course, is the former science editor at the New York Times who was exposing the fraud behind the COVID narrative. So we have here not private companies acting independently. What we have here is private companies acting as agents of the state. And added to that, you know, almost every one of these companies was actually started up with U.S. taxpayer money, with support from U.S. government agencies. That is, DARPA, for example, played a role in the founding of Google, and now Google is being weaponized against people. Same thing with Facebook. You know, In-Q-Tel, the CIA's investment arm, has been a critical player in the establishment of many of these companies. So it's very hard to tell where the company begins and the government ends, and that in and of itself means that they need to be bound by the First Amendment. They need to stop discriminating against Christians and against conservatives, against people who they disagree with. And as far as I'm concerned, this is government action aimed at silencing dissent, aimed at silencing speech that is completely intolerable. It's completely unconstitutional, and it needs to stop.
I was also very surprised in this story that former co-founder Elon Musk, former CEO, also spoke out against this. And I think that should be very telling, right? The people who had a vested interest in making sure this company could succeed are speaking out and saying, get your money out. That should be very, very telling. Do you think, Alex Newman, that this will be the last time that has PayPal learned its lesson now? Are they getting their act straight, or can we expect more of this censorship in the future?
You know, it's like those old stories about the scorpion or the snake, right? It's in their nature. So they did not learn their lesson from this. They learned that they have to do it better from a public relations standpoint. They have to come up with better excuses. But I think as long as the American people tolerate this kind of hatred, this kind of discrimination, these kinds of attacks on free speech, we can expect much more of it, not just from PayPal, but also from Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Google, Microsoft, and all the other big tech companies.
Now, we've talked quite a bit on this show about censorship, especially on the social platforms. We've experienced it firsthand, and it's made life a little bit more difficult to achieve our goals. And we've talked about alternatives, yet when it comes to social media platforms, as good as some of those alternatives are, they really still don't scratch the surface in the ability to reach the masses. And as Christians, that's basically the point of what we do, is to be able to reach the masses, to share the good, the true, and the beautiful, to share Christ. So when it comes to payment processors, are there alternatives that are that are good, that are going to protect us, that are going to give us the ability to continue to do what we do?
There is. In fact, long before PayPal canceled me, I had moved most of my business over to a Christian payment processor that I absolutely love. They have lower fees, better customer service, and it's run by Christians who will not silence you for saying what the Bible says. Right? So that's really exciting. I've been using them for a long time. I couldn't be more pleased with them. The name is Cornerstone. It's a small company, but they do excellent work, and really their customer service is orders of magnitude better than PayPal. So I encourage people to look for alternatives. There are alternatives. There will be more alternatives. And, you're right about some of the social media platforms. It's hard to reach the general public using some of the more niche platforms. And I think part of the reason for that is the government is propping up these big tech companies, right? If you go through your Facebook feed, your Twitter feed, what you'll find is every other ad, sometimes more, is government propaganda telling you to go take a COVID vaccine, telling you to go take a flu shot. I mean, the taxpayer is propping up these companies. So, when possible, I highly recommend people use alternatives. There are much better search engines than Google. There are much better payment processors than PayPal. But, a lot of these, unfortunately, have become practically public utilities, like, phone carriers and things, sewage lines. It's very hard to operate in the modern world without them. And again, that's because of the government's role in building them up. And so we need to be clear that censorship is totally unacceptable on a taxpayer-funded platform.
I still get a great chuckle out of every time I hear someone or read somebody on Twitter using the word fascist to describe, somebody who's conservative or Republican or whatever. But the very definition of socialism and fascism is a public-private cooperation. And isn't this like the very definition of that?
It is, and it's the model that these people hope to use for everything, right? The public-private partnership, the stakeholder capitalism model that Klaus Schwab and the Rothschilds have been promoting, where companies, instead of doing the bidding of shareholders, right? If PayPal was doing the bidding of shareholders, they wouldn't be burning their company to the ground by silencing and discriminating against Christians. But they're not serving their shareholders. They're serving, as Klaus Schwab put it, the government, right, and the other stakeholders in this community, as Klaus Schwab of the World Economic would put it. So, it's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous situation, and it really is the definition of fascism. Benito Mussolini described fascism as the merger of corporate and state power. It's exactly what we're witnessing here, and all these legions of so-called anti-fascists are cheerleading it like bobbleheads. It's very pathetic.
Yeah. All right, Alex Newman from Liberty Sentinel, thank you for your input and your time today. We're very grateful to you.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, praise be to God. God bless you.